what you can do. God of wonder, your power has no end. Things you've done before, greater measure, you will do again. 'Cause there's no prison wall you can't break through, no mountain you can't move, all things are possible. There's no broken body you can't raise, no soul that you can't save, all things are possible. The darkest night, you can light it up, you can light it up. God of revival, let hope arise, death is overcome, you've already won. God of revival, rose in victory, now you're seated ever on your throne. So why should my heart fear you defeated? I will trust in you alone. There's no prison wall you can break through, no mountain you can't move, all things are possible. There's no broken body you can't raise, no soul that you can't save, all things are possible. Darkest night, you can light it up, you can light it up. God of revival, the dead will rise, death is overcome, you've already won. God of revival, God of revival. Come awaken your people, come awaken the city. God of revival, pour it out, pour it out. Every stronghold will crumble, the chains hit the ground. God of revival, pour it out, pour it out. Come awaken your people, come awaken the city. God of revival, pour it out, pour it out. Every stronghold will crumble, I hear the chains hit the ground. God of revival, pour it out, pour it out. The darkest Pour it out, Lord. Come awaken your people. Pour it out, Lord. Pour it out, Lord. Pour it out, Lord. There's no prison wall you can't break through, no mountain you can't move. All things are possible. There's no broken body you can raise, no soul that you can't save. Things are possible. Things are possible.
How's it going, Restore? We're so thankful that you're joining with us today, wherever you're at. Maybe you're at home watching, maybe you're at work, maybe you're in your car listening to the message today. I'm not really sure where you're at, but we are thankful that you are joining with us and that you can connect in so many different ways with Restore. We are getting ready to start a brand new series, and I'm really excited to be a part of this, excited to kick it off. I feel like God's got some really good stuff for me through this series that I've been kind of working through in this message and in this series. And I hope that there's something in this for you, that something each week as myself or Pastor Dave comes and brings a message, that you would find something that God has for you. When I was in high school, I wrestled. And in wrestling, we had so many different types of athletes. We had guys that had never wrestled before. We had guys that's all they've done is wrestle their whole lives. And so every year it was always interesting to find out who was going to be on the team. And we always had the guys that came back every year, right? There was two wrestlers that I remember that kind of had their very distinct postures when they wrestled. One of his name was Benny, the other's name was Jake. Benny was about my size, smaller guy, one of our lighter weights. All the way through high school, he was one of our lighter weights, and he was a fiery guy. I mean, this guy, every single time he came out, it was like he shot out of a cannon. He gave 1,000% of energy every single match. I know, right. I get it. The most you can give is 100%, right? But this guy, he was like on fire, 1,000%. And one of Benny's trademarks was he always wore really tall socks when he wrestled. And so he would get the really tall athletic socks, and they were always different colors. And there was just these funky socks that he was always wearing. So he would go out to wrestle in his singlet, and he would pull the socks all the way up as high as they could go, sometimes almost to his knees. And he would go out there and he'd be wrestling and go, and he'd be running up to the mat just with all of this energy, all of this excitement. See, he was a good wrestler. He wasn't a state champion type wrestler, but he was one of our better wrestlers. He was a guy that would go to the state tournament. I don't remember if he ever placed in the state tournament, but he was a good, exciting wrestler. Not an all-star and not like this, state champion type wrestler. But I remember one match in particular with Benny. He was a year older than me, and he went out on the mat, and he was wrestling a guy that he had already lost to once before. And this guy was better than him. And I remember when Benny would go out on the mat, for this match in particular, he went out there like he was on fire. He just sprints around the mat, goes and checks into the table, and just sprints right to the center of the mat, puts his toe on the line, and he's ready to go. His other guy comes out, he kind of warms up, does this little, warm up, a little maneuver. He had checked in at the table. He puts his toe on the line. They go. They're kind of circling each other. They're wrestling. They're kind of tapping each other's heads. Benny shoots. And eventually they go kind of out of the circle. Now in wrestling, if you've not watched wrestling before, there's like this outer circle that's kind of your out of bounds line. And when one of you has 2 feet out, or when you both kind of go out, they restart the match back at the center. So Benny and this young man are wrestling and kind of going at it, and they both go off the mat. And as they go off the mat, Benny sprints back to the center circle, puts his toe on the line, and he's ready to go. Meanwhile, the other wrestler is kind of just walking his way back, and when he realizes that Benny's already back, he kind of sort of jogs a little bit more. Kind of jogs back to the middle. They start up again. And the same thing throughout the match. Every time they would go off the mat, or every time it was time to restart the match, and they'd come back to the center of the circle, Benny would sprint back as if he had all the energy in the world. Now, we know that Benny has been working really hard all week. We know behind the scenes he's been losing weight and he's tired and he's exhausted. But see, when he goes out on the mat, his posture is as if he has all the energy in the world. So the entire match, Benny is doing this. First period, second period. Every time they go off the edge of the mat, they're going right back to the center. And Benny is sprinting. And by the end of the second period, start of the third period, his opponent is starting to show his exhaustion. And so the third period is going on. Benny is down by 1 point. And they go off the end of the mat. And as they go off the edge of the mat, Benny comes sprinting back to the middle and goes down on his hands and knees in the referee's position, ready for the ref to blow the whistle. His opponent, as he's kind of standing back up, looks over, puts his head down, and walks back to the middle and gets ready. Benny immediately shoots out of his position when the whistle blows and is doing everything he can trying to get one escape point to tie the match. Now Benny is just going absolutely crazy. He's moving around trying to get free, and as he goes off the end of the mat, Benny sprints back to the middle. See, Benny's posture has not changed. Benny's posture is as if I have all of the energy in the world. I'm not tired. I'm just getting going. And as Benny sprints back to the middle, gets down with his hands and knees, ready in the referee's position, his opponent, slowly, exhausted, takes his time coming back to the middle. The referee looks at him and says, "Caution, stalling." The other wrestler's like, "What are you talking about? I wasn't stalling." He's like, "Stalling." Benny gets down. He gets up. He escapes 1 point. It's a tie match. See, Benny continually, over the last 30 seconds, shoots and shoots and shoots his man back and back and back and off the mat. Caution again. See, Benny had the posture in that match the entire time, even though he knew he wasn't the best wrestler on the mat that night. Benny had a posture of non-stop energy. He had this posture that he was like, I'm not going to stop. The moment the whistle blows, the moment we go off the mat and we have to restart, I'm sprinting back to the middle. See, his posture, the way he carried himself in that moment, in that match, set the tone for everything. Benny ended up winning that match and had an upset win over this young man. But see, his posture carried the rest of the team. See, he went out there after that match, after he had won. The next guy goes in, checks into the mat, and pinned his guy within the first 30 seconds of the match. Another man that I wrestled with, Jake Elgin. Now, Jake was this big, tall, lanky guy, super strong, but he hadn't really wrestled a lot in his life, and he only wrestled for a few years, and he was good at one move, the headlock. See, he knew his posture was, I'm going to come out there and I'm going to headlock you. You may think that you're not going to get tossed and I'm not going to throw you, but I'm going to come out there and I'm going to throw you, and it's your job to get out of it. See, every single time he would go out on the mat, so it was the same object for him. See, my posture is with him, I'm going to walk out there, I'm going to do this, you're going to stop me. See, in this series, we're going to be looking at living our life for a purpose, on purpose. See, it matters that each one of us knows that you were created with a purpose for what God has for you. See, we've all wondered from time to time what we're going to do with our lives. Maybe it was, for some of us, it was close to graduation or after graduation. We kind of just wondered, I wonder what I should do with my life. What do you think my calling is in life? For others, maybe it was in our 20s. We tried college, we tried one job, and then tried one education. It didn't work. We had to kind of split and go a different direction. So we tried something that didn't work, and we were calling out, wondering, what is the calling in life? What is my purpose in life? For others, it's as we transition careers. For some, it's as we retire. As you retire, your purpose was to work for a certain company, to do a certain job, and then you're no longer doing that, and now what? Now what do we do? What is my purpose? What is my calling? For most of us, there will be multiple times in our lives that we look and wonder what the question and the calling is for our soul. What is the purpose of my life? What is my calling? In Ephesians chapter 4, Paul is calling out to the church in Ephesus, and it's almost as if the people in Ephesus have been wondering what they do next. You see, they've started following Jesus, and now they probably are wondering, what next? What is our calling? What is a calling in our lives as the church of Ephesus? And Paul, it's in the New Living Translation, Paul says, I'm begging you. I'm begging you. And I can just see Paul, as he's writing this, just on his hands and knees saying, I am just begging you, church in Ephesus. I am begging you to lead a life worthy of your calling. And as I read this, I just kind of imagine just the joy that Paul is writing this with. That he's saying, oh my God, if you can just know, I'm just begging you that you can lead a life worthy of your calling, the calling God has placed on you. See, I wonder if there are people in the church that are living short of the purpose, the calling that God had for them. See, what is a calling on their lives? In the Gospels, Jesus is asked, what is the greatest command for our lives? What is the greatest command that we can have for our lives? In essence, what the people are asking is, what is the calling on our life? What is the greatest calling on our life, the greatest command? And Jesus responds with this. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. That's a lot. And then he says, the second is like this, to love your neighbor as yourself. See, this is so important. This moment that Jesus is trying to explain to them here in the Gospels, it is so important for you to know the commands and the calling on your life. These two things that God is calling us to, that Jesus shares in this moment, is to follow him. Is to love him first with everything we are, all that we have, and to then love our neighbor as ourselves. The problem isn't the calling. The problem is when we live short of this. We live our life as if our calling is out of whack. It's kind of off kilter. So our posture that we walk with is, when we don't walk in this moment of our true calling and who God has called us to be, it messes up with the rest of our lives. See, when we don't live this calling that God has for us, when we don't live worthy of this calling, it affects everything else. See, it starts with the posture. The posture and the position, this calling on our lives. So we need to get this right. We need to get this posture and the purpose. What does your posture look like? I wonder how you're carrying yourself. Our physical posture is really important. They say that if you don't have the correct walking posture, it can put undue pressure on your joints, and especially your knees and hips. And so when we don't have the right posture, we don't walk with the right posture or sit with the right posture or sleep in the right positions, you can feel it, right? You can just feel your body just isn't in sync. It isn't doing what it needs to do, and it can wear out your knees sooner on one side over the other. About a year and a half ago, I started having some back pain. My lower back was really hurting to the point where I could get up from my desk at work and I could be in my desk working, but the moment I stood up, it was almost as if I was like this statue. I could move like this, and it was so much pain in my lower back, and it just felt like that something was kind of like pinching and stabbing in my back, and so I tried a lot of stuff. I tried muscle relaxing medicine. I tried putting Bengay on my back to see if it could loosen the muscles up and see if it could help with this pain that I was having. And it was just, at one point, after a number of days of trying to fix it myself, I ended up going to a chiropractor to see if they could fix it, see if they could help me with what was going on. And when I went into the chiropractor's office, he kind of laid me down and sat me up in different positions and checked my back, and he kind of looked at my lower back and my hips, and then he kind of laid me down and kind of checked my legs out and saw if there was something that he could do to fix it. And he sat me up and he said, okay, your back, your body's out of alignment. I can really feel your lower back and your hips. There's this out of alignment moment. And I think that with a couple of adjustments, we can take care of this. And we can kind of get you going in the right direction. And so he laid me kind of on my side, and he twisted my hip one way, and he put his elbow on my back, and he kind of leaned on me and kind of like that. And I heard a pop, and that sudden pain, and then I started feeling a little better. And then he did it a couple more times. Then he flipped me to my other side, and he did the same thing, adjusting and pops and kind of moving my hips around. And after a while, he sat me up and he's like, how does it feel now? And I said, oh, it feels a lot better. And so I came back another time that week, and I came back a third time, and different adjustments. And finally, I just felt like I was just in a better position, and my back felt better. I didn't have the pain and the uncomfortable muscles in my back. And we all know that if we don't sit, walk, stand, sleep the right way, if our body is out of alignment, if we don't walk with the right posture, it affects everything else. See, when I walk in my job, I'm walking around, I'm not wearing the right shoes, if I'm pain. See, if I don't take care of my body in the right ways, it will start to show in smaller areas of my life. See, for a while in my personal life, I didn't see the need to talk to people about my emotional wounds and scars. See, I didn't feel like the stuff that I had dealt with in my past was relevant today. The stuff that I had carried with me as a young person into my teenage years and adult years, and now today, I didn't feel like it was something that I needed to deal with. It felt as if God should be enough. If God was enough, then I wouldn't have these problems. I could just pray it out. I can just pray out these moments in my life that God should be enough. And I want to tell you that God is enough. But there are times when he utilizes people and professions around us in order to help us get healthy and in alignment, to help our posture and what we do in our life to align our faith with what God has for us. See, I needed other people in my life, people who had faith, to bring insight, techniques, and therapies to help me work through my trauma, the things I had been through in my life. See, God was calling me to step into my past for a little bit and work through those moments and heal. See, those moments, these last few years that I've worked through that stuff, I realized I had lost the identity God had saw in me. See, I had lost the identity of who God sees me as. Lost the calling and my posture in life started to get out of whack. It started to kind of get out of place. And so it started to affect other places and other positions in my life. See, I did not see my identity. God calling me who he wanted me to be. See, at times it was like looking in a broken mirror. I could see shadows of myself. I could see places of myself, but yet there was cracks. I never felt as if I was worthy of more. My identity was off. Bitterness and insecurity had started to replace the idea of who I was. Just like my physical posture was needed to be corrected so that I could live a life that I knew I was capable of. So it was with our spiritual life. See, if we can get our spiritual posture correct, if we can get our spiritual alignment set in the right direction, if we can get it corrected and in the correct alignment, it changes everything. See, your spiritual posture matters to God. In Ephesians, Paul says, I beg you, I plead with you to lead a life worthy of your calling. For you, Ryan, have been called by God. This is an amazing moment when we read this because it starts to shape the posture and the position of our life. It starts to shape this purpose that you and I have. See, our purpose is to love the Lord our God with all that we have, with every part of our being, and to love our neighbor as ourselves. See, that's our purpose. This inexplicable purpose, this purpose that is beyond anything I could ever imagine. And when I get my posture right, when I'm postured in the right position, in the right way, that I can see who God actually is in my life, that I can see his calling on my life, it affects our money, it affects our family, it affects the work that we do. It impacts everything around us because we have the correct posture in our lives. Jeremiah 29:11. We hear this all the time. Jeremiah 29, it says, For I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord. They are plans for good and not for disaster, to give you future and a hope. And we quote this verse and we say this verse as if that God has this amazing plan for us, to be all that he can be in our lives, all that we can be for him. That God has this tremendous plan, this tremendous hope for us, and he does. Yet sometimes we think that God has those plans set apart from everything else. See, God has these plans for me, this purpose for me, this calling on my life, but sometimes we take it and we set it aside and say, it's over here, everyone else is over there. See, the plan and the purpose, this idea that God has something for us is right here, but everything else is over there. But we forget that in verses 4 through 7, God calls them to stay where they are, to stay in their situation, to stay in this moment, to not run away. And he says this. This is what the Lord of heaven's armies, the God of Israel, says to all the captives he has exiled to Babylon from Jerusalem. Build homes and plan to stay. Plant gardens and eat the food they produce. Marry and have children, and then find spouses for them, so that they may have many grandchildren. Multiply, do not dwindle away, and work for the peace and prosperity of the city where I sent you to exile. Pray to the Lord, for its welfare will determine your welfare. See, the problem is at times we want to take the purpose God has for us and separate it from the place God has for us. We want to take this purpose that he has and separate it from the place. And God says, no, I'm calling you to this place. I want to realign your outlook. I want to realign this idea of what you have. See, the grace is that we have been given this calling and purpose in our lives, and when we live it out of the correct posture, when he says, I don't want you to forget about the communities where you live. I want you to live a posture of planted down, a posture of your calling. I want you to live out a posture of purpose. Live worthy of your calling. When we take the time to live our lives worthy of the calling God has for us, it impacts our money, our work, and our families for the better. And they see the deep impacts of it in our lives. When I first started coaching wrestling, I could see that my life was a lot different than the other coaches. Much different, actually. And so that first year I lived my life, I walked with a posture of purpose, knowing that just because I was not at a church speaking from a stage, that didn't change the calling and the purpose of my life. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. And the second is to love your neighbor as yourself. At the end of the year, of living this out, of living from a posture of purpose, of the calling that God has for me, of living worthy of his calling. At the end of the season, one of the managers came up to me and she says, Coach Trozen, I want to let you know that I've been watching you. I'm kind of watching how you talk. I'm watching how you act. I watch how you deal with the wrestlers, how you pay for the meals and you give the kids a little bit of money to get snacks and stuff like that. You bring extra food. I watch how you work with us, and it's different. See, you're different. There's something different about you. I want to let you know I've noticed it. She wasn't talking about how I'm just kind of weird and kind of, different, but she was saying there's something different about you, and that difference was that I purposely lived my life. I purposely wasn't an accident. Over the next 3 weeks, we're going to be looking at the inescapable purpose that God has for our lives. But see, before we get to there, we need to have the right alignment. If our posture is wrong, we're going to be living less than life. One of the things that I hate more than anything else is a certain phrase. When I hear people talk about how one of their children was an accident. See, it drives me crazy on a number of levels, but the most frustrating part of this is it calls God's plans less than. This person was an accident. This moment, this time in their life was an accident. Who they are was an accident. See, less than the inescapable purpose that he has for us. Less than you are worth. Because you see, you are worthy of all that God has for you. You are worthy of his love. You are worthy of his story. You are worthy of the calling on your life. See, you and I have an inescapable purpose. See, we need to live this inescapable purpose with a posture that is worthy of the King. Today might be a day, this moment might be a moment that you need to have an adjustment. I was told as a kid, my mom would always say, you need an attitude adjustment. And I probably did. I think there are times in our lives when we need to have our posture adjusted so that we are positioned in a way that we are making the best impact on all those things in our lives. See, today might be a day that you need the adjustment to get realigned into what you've been called to do so your work, money, and family thrive. See, this last year has affected us all very deeply in some ways that we may not even realize quite yet. These last few months, I have found myself being painfully realigned by God. God has taken different moments of hate and judgment, sorrow, wounded parts of me, and has started to realign them and heal them. And see, when he realigns the hate in our lives, when he takes that pain of hate and that pain of judgment, that pain of whatever it is for you, when he realigns you in his grace and when he realigns you in his love, see, those moments of hate and sadness, those moments of pain are replaced by grace, mercy, love, hope, justice, and patience. See, there are moments when we need to change everything, and it matters. That there's moments of sadness and frustration. There are moments when we have these frustrating moments that we just want to give up. Yet God calls us to something different. He calls us to joy. He calls us in the moments that we want to give up, that we want to give in to joy. Live from a posture of the purpose in his calling for you. That's where it's at.